Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1996 family fantasy film, The Adventures of Pinocchio. Now, this is a film that I knew about because I remember seeing advertisements for it in comics and magazines that I had when I was a kid. There might have even been like a trailer before one of the VHS tapes that I had, but I didn't really ever decide to watch it. I didn't even rent the movie. I guess it's because I was never really like the biggest fan of Pinocchio. I mean, I didn't mind the Disney animated film. I did watch that a decent number of times. But that's because as a kid, a lot of the movies that I had were the Disney animated films. So I didn't really have the widest selection to choose from. So Pinocchio was one that I would watch when I was tired of watching some of the other ones that I had, but it's not one that I would say I watched the most. So I went into this with incredibly low expectations, and you know what? I didn't mind this for what it was. Uh, and there's actually a fair amount of things about this that I think are genuinely unique and honestly worthwhile. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on the film, though, I want to give another shout out to Sean for requesting this review. The Adventures of Pinocchio is directed by Steve Barron, who you might be familiar with. He directed the 1990 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film. He also directed Coneheads prior to this. So this was his follow-up to Coneheads and Ninja Turtles, and it pretty much killed his career as a feature film director because after this film came out and bombed, he never really got another shot to direct anything other than indie films and like TV movies. Or I would say his biggest project he did after this is the Merlin TV miniseries with Sam Neill. And his direction is not really a problem here. It's not what I would consider to be one of the reasons why this film bombed. I honestly think he did a really good job. It's a film that is much more akin to the original source material, the Pinocchio fairy tale by Carlo Collodi. So it's much more along those lines in terms of that kind of storytelling. It's not really a Disney film. It's not a Disney movie in terms of like the Disney animation or the Disney spirit. Like it doesn't really have that. First off, it's a live action adaptation. So there really isn't much animation unless you consider the CGI cricket sequences to be animated. But other than that, everything that can be done practically is done practically here. And Steve Barron is a really great director when it comes to showcasing the magic of practical effects. I mean, he did that with the 1990 Ninja Turtles film, he also did that with Coneheads, and he does that again here, where he showcases the brilliant, just wonderful practical effects by the Jim Henson Creature Shop, who did the Pinocchio puppet and mechanical effects. And the other various effects shots and sequences for this film. And the way that he shoots them, it's with care, it's with respect, it's with admiration for the craft, and it's really a sight to behold. And I think he does a good job capturing just the overall fantastical fantasy elements of Pinocchio and the world and its story. And it's definitely a film that very much looks like something out of a fairy tale. And he has some shots that are very unorthodox at points in terms of some of the ways that he utilizes the angles or the camera techniques, but it's something that really adds to the film. It adds to its spectacle. I mean, it's a movie that had a pretty decent budget. I mean, it's a film that cost $25 million. So it's not like this was a film that was made for a really cheap budget. And you could definitely see that on screen when it comes to the production design and the art direction and the special effects. And it was just fun to see Steve Barron, who is somebody who is really well known for shooting practical effects and working with the Jim Henson Creature Shop with the 1990 Ninja Turtles film. It was really cool to see him work alongside the Creature Shop again, and a lot of practical effects heavy shots, and also to see him do a fairy tale. And because of the fact that he already did something like Ninja Turtles and Coneheads, you got really Steve at his best here. I think his direction in this is really underrated and undervalued because I think he did a genuinely great job uh, in terms of making this kids movie that is in a lot of ways very weird and surreal into something that actually has some genuinely mesmerizing qualities to it and looks great. The screenplay is by Sherry Mills, Steve Barron, Tom Benedek, and Barry Berman. And the script, I think, is fine. I don't think it's great, though. I think, in all honesty, this is a adaptation of Pinocchio that is clearly trying to be a little bit darker, a little bit more subversive or strange than some of the other live action adaptations of Pinocchio at the time, and definitely a lot different than the Disney version. And you would really see something like that in terms of a darker approach to the story in Del Toro's Pinocchio. But here, it's still trying to be a kids movie, but then it's still having lines of dialogue about people being hung, and there's some really disturbing, creepy moments of like body horror. So it's one of those movies where you're like, I could see what they were trying to do, but at the same time, I wish they were able to go farther than they ultimately did. Um, because this whole in between thing of trying to be closer to the book, which is actually genuinely dark. The original fairy tale was actually pretty dark and creepy and weird. And it's trying to be closer to that, having the events take place in the 18th century in Italy, but it's not really able to fully embrace that. So it's this kind of halfway thing, and it doesn't always work that well. Because when it's trying to be more of a movie for kids, it's honestly pretty lame. When it's trying to be something a little bit different, a little bit more complex, then it's honestly really interesting. When it comes to the stuff involving um, the villain Lorenzi and the island where he has all of the roller coasters and all the stuff for the boys to play with and to not have any rules. And then of course that ties into the donkey transformation, which was in the original story, and it was also in the Disney movie. And the way that it's portrayed here is straight up nightmare fuel. And there's a lot of other moments where it's actually pretty dark and disturbing. Um, like the transformation of Lorenzi, who ultimately turns into the giant whale, which I thought was pretty trippy and pretty wild and pretty crazy. And there's scenes like when Pinocchio is in a classroom and he lies and his nose grows, but the way that it's presented, it's this very surreal sequence because everybody is just reacting like it's normal. And so it creates this very uncanny valley kind of vibe for that scene. And there's a lot of that throughout the film. And I think that's really where it's at its best when it comes to its story, too, is when it's embracing the uncanniness of this concept, this idea of a puppet that comes to life magically and interacts with a fairly realistic world and landscape in 18th century Italy. And the mix of the fantastical with the real and a period piece is really something that I think is actually kind of inspired. But then you get to dumb slapstick, with Rob Schneider's character Volpe and his partner Fillionette, and it just doesn't really work as well. And then there's other stuff with Pinocchio, like the whole scene where he goes and trashes Dawn French's bakery, the baker's wife. Um, and then there's like a court scene afterwards where Geppetto is almost gonna get sentenced to prison for years for the actions of his puppet, but then the villain Lorenzi comes in and makes a deal, and the deal involves him taking Pinocchio, and then he has Pinocchio be a part of his puppet show, and the puppet show looks like something out of a Terry Gilliam movie. It legitimately does. It looks like a cutscene from Baron Munchausen, and so there's a lot of that in this, and when it's going that route, it's actually rather engaging and surprisingly compelling for a uh, adaptation of Pinocchio that's rated G, and that's why I ultimately liked it, despite having some issues with it. But when it's trying to be funny, it really falls flat because there's barely any laughs to speak of. When it's trying to be heartfelt, it comes across as really saccharine, sugary sweet, and not necessarily in the most genuine, authentic way. But when it's trying to be weird and surreal and trippy, it is very effective. And there are also some moments where it's actually surprisingly kind of gross and disturbing. Not just the donkey transformation, but there's a scene where Geppetto and Pinocchio are swallowed by the whale, and they're inside of the whale, and it's all done practically, and it's it honestly looks like a very gross and an uncomfortable place. Like it's just slimy and it's just icky. And then you have the whole stuff with the cricket too, which is not technically magical, but the way that he keeps appearing constantly, it kind of makes you think that there might be something magic involved, but there isn't, I guess. Um, which I will admit that aspect was kind of confusing to me. I expected oh, it was Jiminy Cricket, but it's not. It's Pepe, this talking cricket, who I guess is supposed to be Pinocchio's conscience, but the way that it's written and the way that it's executed is just kind of muddled and kind of a mess. And of course, the typical Pinocchio fashion, after the whole stuff on the island where the kids can be misfits and then ultimately get turned into donkeys, um, Pinocchio winds up going into the ocean to try to find Geppetto because Geppetto went into the ocean to try to find him. And they wind up getting eaten by the whale, which is the bad guy, Lorenzi, who is now transformed into the whale, and the design of the whale too is really freaky looking. It even has human teeth. Like it's a really disturbing image. And they find a way to get out of the whale because Pinocchio lies on purpose to make his nose grow, and it irritates the whale's throat muscles enough to cough them out. And then, of course, through the power of, I guess, love and the same magic that brought him to life, he winds up being transformed into a real boy at the end, played by Jonathan Taylor Thomas of Home Improvement fame, who also voiced Pinocchio in this. And there's also a bit of a love story that's kind of going on between Geppetto and Leona, who is a friend of his, who was living in the same Italian locale and neighborhood as he was, but he never really expressed his love for her until pretty recently when it comes to the events of the movie. And they ultimately get together. And it was sweet, but it did feel kind of rushed. And there's stuff involving Fionette and Volpe, and they eventually do get their comeuppance. They get transformed into animals. Fionette gets turned into a cat, and Volpe gets turned into a fox, and they act like they're animal characters at points too before they get transformed, which was really just weird to me and not in a good way like some of the other aspects of the movie. I was just like, why is Rob Schneider like barking? And why is Babe Neuwirth acting like she's a cat? Like why is she hissing and meowing at points? Like what is up with these two? Um but I felt it did a good job really making you sympathize with Geppetto early on and making you feel for him and making you understand why he is willing to risk everything for Pinocchio because Pinocchio represents in a lot of ways something that he was never able to have. He was never able to have a son. So Pinocchio coming to life is like him having a boy. And so now he's having to handle the responsibilities of being a father. And because of that, he's willing to sacrifice a lot of things in order to be able to have Pinocchio be a part of his life. And the villain is effectively villainous. I mean, the guy is a straight up psycho. Lorenzi, he is a demented, uh, crazy villain. Like, this is a guy who not only has like the curly, twirly mustache and so on and so forth, but the guy like lives on tormenting people. Like there's this whole thing with his puppet show where he eats spicy peppers and blows into a whale puppet and just lights stuff on fire, and he's just ecstatic at the concept of just burning shit. And then it continues as he's revealed to be the one behind turning the kids into asses, turning them into donkeys, so he can sell them for a profit. Like the guy is completely screwed in the head, and it's in a way that honestly is kind of terrifying at points for a rated G movie. Honestly, I don't know how the hell this got a G rating. I really do not know how. This is like PG. This is totally a PG movie. I don't understand how it got a G rating, especially in 1996. Like, it was 1986, that'd be one thing. But in 1996, they were starting to tighten up a little bit more on the ratings and stuff like that. But I guess this one fell in between the cracks because this is not a G-rated movie. There's a lot of dark, twisted stuff in this that really would not be in your typical G-rated film. And that's in large part why it's so unique and why it's honestly kind of an interesting, fun watch is because it's a kids movie that's rated G, but it's got this dark undertone and it's got this uncanny valley aspect to it, and it's got some really great practical effects by the Jim Henson Creature Shop. And there's some other elements of it that are good too. The cast, I actually think is pretty good too. Martin Landau, I really liked as Geppetto. Even though some of his line delivery was a bit stiff, I think his just endearing nature really shined and really made up for that. And he just did a really good job playing a lovable, kind old man. And the total opposite of his performance in Ed Wood, for instance. But it was a really a good performance, in my opinion, by him. And it's honestly one of my favorite Geppetto performances because I really enjoyed his take on the character. Jonathan Taylor Thomas was also not too bad as the voice of Pinocchio. Uh, he did the best that he could when it comes to the limited dialogue that he was given. Pinocchio doesn't really have a lot of dialogue in this. He says a few things here and there, but there's a lot of moments where Pinocchio doesn't really say much. And I think a lot of it probably is due to the limitations of the puppet. Like maybe that was something that was incorporated into the script. Like they knew that okay, the puppet is going to look good, but in order to have the mouth move and have all this other stuff, like there's going to be a lot of complications with that. So let's just make the character have smaller chunks of dialogue. David Doyle, who voiced Pepe, I didn't really care for his take on the cricket. It was just kind of annoying to me. I guess originally it was Wallace Shawn from The Princess Bride and other films, but he got replaced by David Doyle. I think this is one of the last things that he did before he passed away, if I remember correctly. And I don't know, I just didn't really care for it. I didn't really care for the cricket anyway. The CGI was uncanny valley in the wrong way, like where it definitely didn't look like it was something that was real, but it didn't look like it was like a fairy tale come to life or anything. It didn't look like that kind of aspect of uncanny valley. It just looked like straight up bad 90s CGI. And the rest of the cast, I mean, Geneviève Bujold, it was interesting to see her in a film like this, but I don't think she really had that much chemistry with Martin Landau, and I don't really think she was given a that good of a role. She's just basically being the worried friend of Geppetto for most of the movie. Um, Udo Kier, he played a great villain in this. I loved his performance as Lorenzini. Like I really enjoyed it. I thought Udo Kier nailed it. He was very aware of what the assignment was. He was supposed to play a mustache twirling, sadistic, creepy bad guy, and he did that and then some. It's honestly one of my favorite Udo Kier performances is as Lorenzini in this. Babe Neuwirth and Rob Schneider, they were okay. Rob Schneider was a redhead in this, which is a different look for him, but he was pretty subdued in this. There wasn't a lot of the Schneider isms in this performance. It was just more of a low key comedic performance, which was interesting to watch, but it still wasn't what I would consider to be anything that special. And then when it comes to the rest of the cast, I wanted to mention Corey Carrier, who played young Indiana Jones in the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. He played Indy ages 8 to 10 in that show. But he was also in Bushwhacked. He played a character named Ralph, and it was fun to see him as Lampwick. It wasn't so fun to see him turn into a donkey. That was honestly pretty scary. And I really felt for him. But he ultimately transforms back by the end of the movie, so it's all good. Dawn French, who I love, who I think it is an amazing, talented comedian from the UK. She plays the baker's wife, just an unnamed baker, and she didn't really have anything to work with here, which is too bad. I saw her name in the credits, and I was like, okay, what is Dawn gonna do? And then she was just given a nothing role. Yeah, the rest of the cast is fine, but that's really the main cast. Martin Landau, Jonathan Taylor Thomas, Udo Kier. David Doyle also narrates the movie, and I don't think that necessarily works that well either because he uses the same voice that he used for the cricket. It features cinematography by Juan Ruiz Anchia, and it's all right. It's definitely a film that has a nice cozy look and feel to it at points when it needs to be more heartfelt and closer in tone to what you would see in the Disney Pinocchio, but it also is willing to be a little bit more out there when it comes to the more surreal sequences in the film. And the editing by Sean Barton I felt worked. It definitely added to the intensity of some of the more intense, wild, crazy sequences, especially in the climax. And the music by Rachel Portman, it's fine, but it's not anything fantastic or particularly that good. I know Brian May was involved in the soundtrack in some capacity. Brian May from Queen. In fact, he actually was Pinocchio's singing voice. They like uh, um, altered his voice in post and like raise it up some octaves, and it's very obvious, and it sounds really bad. And he composed some of I think he helped write some of the songs that were used for the film. They're fine, but they're not anything I would consider to be on par with some of the other better musicals that were around um, at that time or even prior. So, music wise, it's kind of it's really more of a mixed bag when it comes to the music, but as a film, I thought it was fine. I didn't love it because it definitely is something that's trying to be a film that appeals to younger audiences or kids, and then it's also trying to be really weird and surreal and kind of disturbing at points and trippy and be closer to a dark fairy tale, but it just isn't really able to fully go in that direction. But I don't think it's anywhere near as bad as some of the critics made it out to be. And I've seen a lot worse when it comes to family films from the 1990s. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Pinocchio. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. See ya.